Welcome to the new series. I've currently dubbed this as Game Talk because, well, we talk about games. I'm hoping this allows me to speak out a bit on smaller topics more quickly, but allows me to spend more time on my bigger videos without a big gap in content. So, here we go. So the quote-unquote surprise Nintendo Direct came out a few days ago, bright and early at 7 AM, and honestly, it was pretty good. I really wasn't expecting some major announcements to show up in a short surprise direct, so I was pretty satisfied with what we managed to have the other day. However, some people seem pretty divided on the prevalence of ports coming onto the Switch both this year and last, so I'd like to discuss the matter a bit on this episode of Game Talk. So, let's be honest, the Wii U was a failure. Don't get your knickers in a twist over it, but despite my own affection for the console, I can admit that it was a failure. So I'm personally pretty happy to see Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze and Hyrule Warriors making their way onto the Switch. I actually had a big conflict last month over Hyrule Warriors, because I really wanted to play it, but I didn't want to have to dust off my Wii U for it, and I really didn't want to play an action game with the gamepad. And despite the game also appearing on 3DS, it just doesn't perform as well. I'm picky about my games, I know. After my love for Fire Emblem Warriors, I know for a fact that I'll be picking up Hyrule Warriors, and will most likely be trying out Tropical Freeze as well. So from Nintendo's perspective, this is a really great move. This generates some income without having to design a completely new game, and on the player's end, they get a chance to try out a game that they previously couldn't or didn't want to because of the hardware it was on. I've searched around for a bit and I haven't found any prices officially announced, but knowing Nintendo and how they've handled previous ports, these are going to be full price, and that's where my problem comes in. The aforementioned games are both 4 years old, and charging $60 for them would be absolutely absurd. There's no situation where a game of that age deserves to be charging full price after that much time has passed. This was the same thing that we found with Skyrim. Skyrim is 6 years old and has already been ported a handful of times, but for some reason it is still $60 on the Switch. Of course, that's not entirely within Nintendo's power, but with Mario Kart 8 and Pokken Tournament also clocking in at $60 with no changes other than like a really small handful of DLC, they are offenders as well. $30 would be a much more fair price for a direct port, and depending on the extent of the remaster, that price could go up. But in the case where nothing is being changed and the game is just being ported over with like a tiny amount of new content, it's really hard to justify the price. Because if I really wanted to suck it up, I could just play Tropical Freeze on the Wii U for like $15. But when you see games like Yakuza Kiwami and the Crash Bandicoot trilogy receiving complete overhauls and only asking for like $30 or $40, it's really hard to justify a direct port asking for the same amount or even more sometimes. Hopefully Nintendo doesn't start seeing dollar signs and manages to reel in that temptation, because all these Wii U titles could be really healthy for the system. But all of that's first party. On the topic of third party, ports are even better. Third-party developers use ports to test the water before releasing original titles on the system, and the amount of ports or even actual releases coming from big third-party companies has been great, and it shows that the Switch is selling enough to be considered a major competitor to these developers. Dark Souls, Skyrim, LA Noire, Doom, all of these coming to the Switch were monumental, and the success that they've seen or will see will likely persuade their developers and others to join the Switch train and start developing more games for the Switch. The Wii U didn't lack good first-party titles, it lacked good third-party ones. As good as Nintendo's titles may be, they just can't reasonably make enough of them for the console to survive on its own. With Rockstar, Bethesda, EA, and now Bandai Namco showing interest in the system, I truly believe that these ports are a sign for good things to come on the Switch's library. And that's all for this episode of Game Talk. Let me know what you thought about this new format in the comments below. I personally think it'll be a great way for me to put out more content without having to spend all my free time just editing one video, and it allows me to have less of a rush on my bigger ones. If you'd like to take a look at one of my longer videos, just go ahead and click on one of those thumbnails down there on the bottom, or if you really like this, go ahead and click that middle one to subscribe. Thanks for watching and have a good rest of your day.